Do not be afraid. You are safe now.
Hook, the little girl hid beneath the pews of an abandoned church, clutching her mother's hand. Outside, gunfire echoed through the night. She heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, the church doors opened. Standing in the doorway was the most feared Mafia boss in Sicily. His black suit was stained with blood. Everyone believed he had come to finish the job. Instead, he knelt before the terrified orphan and said 6 words that would change both of their lives forever. From today, you're my daughter. Act 1. The Promise. Rain poured over the hills of Sicily, turning the narrow stone streets into rivers of shimmering light. The old village of Castelbuono had long fallen asleep, but tonight the silence was broken by gunfire. Black SUVs sped through the winding roads, their headlights slicing through the darkness as bullets shattered windows and echoed across the valley. People hid behind locked doors. No one dared look outside, because everyone knew what those vehicles carried. A Mafia war. Inside the centuries-old church of St. Michael, candles flickered beneath faded paintings of saints. 8-year-old Isabella Moretti clung tightly to her mother's hand. Both were hiding beneath the wooden pews. Her mother, Maria, struggled to breathe. Blood slowly spread across her blouse. She had been caught in the crossfire while trying to escape the violence consuming the village. Nam. Isabella's voice trembled. We have to leave. Maria forced a weak smile. Not yet. She gently brushed the rain-soaked hair from her daughter's face. No matter what happens, her breathing became heavier. Promise me you'll never let hatred choose your future. Tears streamed down Isabella's cheeks. I promise. Outside, the gunfire suddenly stopped. Silence. Then came the sound of footsteps. Slow, measured, heavy leather shoes striking the ancient stone floor. The church doors creaked open. A tall man stepped inside. His black tailor coat was soaked by the rain. A silver watch gleamed beneath his sleeve. His expression was calm, yet every inch of him carried authority. Don Lorenzo De Luca, the most feared Mafia boss in Sicily. He surveyed the empty church. Then his eyes settled beneath the pews. He slowly walked closer. Isabella squeezed her mother's hand so tightly her fingers hurt. She had heard stories about men like him, stories whispered by adults, stories that always ended with someone disappearing. Lorenzo knelt, not to threaten them, to see them at eye level. Maria recognized him instantly. A faint smile crossed her pale face. So, she whispered, you survived. Lorenzo nodded. Barely. He looked at the wound on her side. You saved me. 20 minutes earlier, Maria had seen a sniper preparing to assassinate Lorenzo as his convoy passed through the village. Without hesitation, she pushed him aside. The bullet meant for Sicily's most feared man struck her instead. She had saved the life of someone she had never met. Lorenzo looked at the frightened little girl. What's your name? She hesitated, then answered softly, Isabella. He nodded. A beautiful name. Maria's breathing grew weaker. She reached into her coat and removed a small silver pendant. Inside was a photograph of Isabella as a baby. She placed it in Lorenzo's hand. I don't have family. There'll be no one left for her. Lorenzo stared at the pendant, then back at Maria. I can arrange protection. She slowly shook her head. No. Her voice barely escaped. They'll keep hunting her. She looked directly into Lorenzo's eyes. Promise me? She'll have a life beyond this war. Lorenzo remained silent. For years, he had built an empire on discipline, on distance, on never allowing emotions to cloud judgment. Yet in that moment, looking at the terrified child, he saw something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. Maria reached for Isabella one final time. I love you. Her hand slipped gently from her daughter's fingers. The church became unbearably still. Mom. No answer. Mom. The little girl's voice broke. She wrapped both arms around her mother, refusing to let go. Lorenzo lowered his head in quiet respect. For several moments, no one spoke. Finally, he removed his black coat and draped it over Maria. Then he looked at Isabella. His voice was calm, certain, and unlike anything anyone expected from the ruthless Don. From this night forward, you'll never face the world alone. He extended his hand. The little girl looked at it, then at her mother, then back at him. With trembling fingers, she took it outside the church. Lorenzo's bodyguard stared in disbelief as he emerged from the rain with the orphan beside him. One of the captains stepped forward. Don Lorenzo, who is a child? Lorenzo never slowed his pace. He simply answered, "My daughter." The captain froze, because he knew that by speaking those two words, Lorenzo De Luca had just started a war that would last for decades. Act 2. The daughter nobody expected. 20 years later, the morning sun bathed the rolling vineyards of Sicily in golden light. Beyond them stood the restored De Luca estate, its stone walls overlooking the Mediterranean, unchanged despite the passing years. But inside, everything was about to change. A sleek black sedan rolled through the iron gates. The guard straightened instantly. The gates opened without a word. Stepping from the car was Isabella Moretti, now 28, confident without arrogance, elegant without extravagance. Her years studying international law, finance, and business strategy in Milan had given her quiet confidence, but the silver pendant around her neck, the one her mother had left behind, remained her most treasured possession. She paused at the entrance. This estate had been her home, but today it felt different, almost as if it were testing whether she still belonged. At the top of the grand staircase stood Don Lorenzo De Luca. Time had silvered his hair, but not his presence. He smiled, a genuine smile, one reserved for only one person. "Welcome home, Bella." She crossed the hall and embraced him. For a brief moment, the feared Don disappeared. He was simply a father. "I missed you." So did Sicily. From the upper balcony, someone watched in silence. Marco De Luca, Lorenzo's nephew. For 20 years, he had been treated as the likely heir to the empire. He had negotiated deals, expanded shipping routes, managed family businesses, and earned the respect of many captains. In his mind, the future already belonged to him. Then Isabella came home. He watched the embrace below. His jaw tightened. One of the older captains stepped beside him. "You always knew this day would come." Marco didn't answer, because deep inside, he had hoped it never would. That evening, the grand dining hall welcomed nearly every senior member of the De Luca organization. Long oak tables, crystal chandeliers, centuries-old paintings. The atmosphere felt more like a royal gathering than a criminal empire. As everyone took their seats, Lorenzo stood. "I have an announcement." The conversation stopped instantly. "My daughter has returned." Polite applause filled the room. Lorenzo continued. "Beginning tomorrow, she'll accompany me to every meeting." Silence. Several captains exchanged uncertain glances. Marco slowly looked up. Lorenzo wasn't finished. "She'll learn every part of this organization." The room became noticeably colder. No one challenged the Don openly, but everyone understood the message. This wasn't simply a homecoming. It was preparation. Later that night, Marco entered Lorenzo's private study. "You want to see me?" Lorenzo nodded. "I know what you're thinking." Marco folded his arms. "Do you?" "I do." Lorenzo walked toward the fireplace. "You've served this family faithfully." "I have. And you'll continue to." Marco hesitated. "Then tell me." He met Lorenzo's eyes. "Am I still your successor?" The room fell silent. The fire crackled between them. Finally, Lorenzo answered, "I haven't chosen one." Marco's shoulders relaxed slightly, but Lorenzo added one final sentence. "They'll earn it." Meanwhile, across Palermo, inside an abandoned shipyard, a meeting was already underway. Several powerful figures sat around a rusted steel table. Photographs of Isabella lay before them. One man lit a cigar. "So, the orphan has returned." Another nodded. "Lorenzo is grooming her." The oldest man at the table smiled coldly. "Then she dies before she learns the rule." He pushed a sealed envelope across the table. Inside, the schedule for Isabella's first public appearance. Someone inside the De Luca organization had leaked it. Again, the next morning, Lorenzo and Isabella left the estate together for a charity foundation she had helped establish for orphaned children across Sicily. Crowds gathered outside the historic building. Reporters waited. Cameras flashed. As Isabella stepped from the car, children rushed forward carrying flowers. She smiled warmly and bent down to greet them. Hidden among the crowd, a man wearing a delivery uniform slowly unzipped a large equipment case. Inside, not camera gear, a precision rifle. He assembled it with practiced speed. Through the scope, the crosshairs settled on Isabella's heart. His finger tightened on the trigger. At that exact moment, a little girl ran toward Isabella for a hug. The assassin hesitated. Just for a second, it was all Lorenzo needed. His instinct screamed before his mind could. He lunged, grabbing Isabella's arm, throwing both of them to the ground. The rifle fired. The bullet tore through the air and struck the marble wall where Isabella had been standing a heartbeat earlier. Screams erupted. People scattered. Bodyguards rushed to shield them. Lorenzo looked toward the rooftop where the shot had come from. His expression changed instantly. This wasn't random. Someone had known exactly where Isabella would be. Someone close. Someone trusted. Someone already inside his empire. Act 3. The promise he never told her. Sirens echoed through the streets of Palermo. Police sealed off the square, while frightened parents rushed their children to safety. The assassin had disappeared before the De Luca security teams reached the rooftop. He left behind only two things: an empty rifle case and a single silver coin engraved with a crowned lion. Marco picked it up. "I've never seen this before." Lorenzo took one look at it. His expression darkened. "I have." He closed his hand around the coin. "They're back." That night, security around the De Luca estate doubled. Every entrance was reinforced. Every vehicle inspected. Every employee questioned. But Isabella couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Why? Why would someone she had never met want her dead? She knocked softly on Lorenzo's study door. "Come in." He was sitting beside the fireplace with 2 glasses of tea already prepared, almost as if he had expected her. She sat across from him. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Isabella broke the silence. "You've never lied to me." Lorenzo nodded. "I've tried not to." "Then tell me the truth." She looked directly into his eyes. "Why did you adopt me?" The question hung heavily in the room. Lorenzo looked toward the flames. His voice was quieter than she had ever heard. "Because I made a promise." "To my mother?" "Yes. But that can't be the whole story." He smiled faintly. "No, it isn't." 20 years earlier, Lorenzo had arrived at the church only minutes after surviving an assassination attempt. But the attack hadn't been random. The sniper had almost succeeded. Maria saw the rifle first. Without thinking about who he was, she pushed him aside. The bullet struck her instead. She had never asked for money, never asked for protection, never even asked his name. Her only concern was Isabella. Lorenzo looked at Isabella. "Your mother gave her life for mine." Tears filled her eyes. "You never told me. I wanted you to grow up free." "Free from what?" "The burden of feeling you owed me." He reached into a drawer. Inside was the blood-stained silver pendant Maria had worn that night. "I've kept this safe for 20 years. She gently took it. Her fingers trembled. "I thought I'd lost it. I promised your mother you'd always have a choice. You would never be forced into my world." She looked around the room. "And yet, I'm here." Lorenzo nodded. "Because you chose to come back." The following afternoon, Lorenzo drove Isabella to a small hill overlooking the sea. There stood an old stone church, the same one where he had found her. An elderly priest slowly emerged from the doorway. His white hair was thinner now, but his warm smile remained unchanged. Father Antonio. Isabella recognized him instantly. He embraced her. "You become exactly the woman your mother prayed you become." They entered the quiet sanctuary. Candles flickered beneath stained glass windows. Father Antonio walked toward the altar, then carefully removed a weathered wooden box hidden beneath it. Inside, letters, photographs, and one sealed envelope bearing Isabella's name. She frowned. My mother wrote to me? The priest nodded. She asked me not to give it to you. Until the day someone tried to kill you. The room fell silent. Isabella slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first line made her stop breathing. My dearest Isabella, if you're reading this, then the people who hunted me have finally found you. She looked up in disbelief. Hunted you? Father Antonio lowered his head. Your mother wasn't caught in random crossfire. Lorenzo closed his eyes. He had hoped this day would never come. The priest continued. Maria had been protecting something. Something powerful enough. That powerful man wanted her dead. Before Isabella could ask another question, the church doors burst open. 3 armed men stormed inside. Black suits. No insignias. Professional. One of them raised his pistol. He looked directly at Isabella, then spoke calmly. Hand over the letter, or the next grave we dig will be yours. Act 4. The woman who chose the crown. The ancient church fell silent. Only the sound of rain tapping against the stained glass windows remained. The leader of the armed men stepped forward. His pistol never left Isabella. Give me the letter. Father Antonio instinctively moved in front of her. You'll have to go through me first. The man sighed. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. Before he could pull the trigger, a deafening gunshot echoed through the sanctuary. One of the attackers collapsed. The church doors flew open. De Luca bodyguards poured inside. A fierce gun battle erupted among the stone pillars. Lorenzo grabbed Isabella. Stay behind me. The attackers retreated through a side entrance into the cemetery beyond the church. Within minutes, the silence returned, broken only by shattered glass and drifting gun smoke. One attacker had escaped. One had been captured. One lay dead on the church floor. Back at the De Luca estate, the captured gunman refused to speak. Hours passed. Every question was met with silence. Then Isabella walked into the interrogation room. She placed the unopened letter on the table. I know you're watching. The gunman frowned. You came here to recover this. She slid the letter closer. If it wasn't important, you wouldn't have risked your life. His eyes followed the envelope. For the first time, he blinked. It was enough. Marco, observing behind a one-way mirror, smiled. She noticed. Lorenzo nodded with quiet pride. She doesn't interrogate people. She studies them. The next morning, forensic analysts examined the silver coin and the attacker's equipment. Everything traced back to one holding company, a shipping corporation operating from the port of Palermo. On paper, it was legitimate. In reality, it had quietly funded several attacks against the De Luca family over the past decade. Someone had built a hidden network beneath Lorenzo's empire. Marco volunteered immediately. I'll lead the operation. Lorenzo shook his head. No, I'm going. Marco frowned. It's too dangerous. Lorenzo looked toward Isabella. So is leading this family. That evening, a convoy of black vehicles approached the shipping warehouse. Lorenzo, Isabella, Marco, and several trusted captains entered cautiously. Rows of empty containers stretched into the darkness. Everything felt too quiet. Suddenly, explosions ripped through the warehouse. Steel beams collapsed. Flames erupted across the loading docks. The convoy had driven directly into an ambush. Gunfire exploded from every direction. Lorenzo pushed Isabella behind a concrete barrier. Stay down. Bullets shattered the walls around them. Marco coordinated the bodyguards, but the attackers kept coming. They weren't ordinary mercenaries. They moved like trained soldiers. One gunman climbed onto an overhead crane. He took careful aim, not at Isabella, at Lorenzo. The shot rang out. Lorenzo staggered backward. Blood spread across his white shirt. Father! Isabella caught him before he hit the ground. His breathing became shallow. Bodyguards fought desperately to hold the attackers back. Marco called for evacuation. Smoke filled the warehouse. Sirens approached in the distance. The attackers vanished into the night. Hours later, the operating room lights remained on. Doctors worked frantically. Outside, every De Luca captain waited in silence. Some prayed. Others stared at the floor. Marco paced nervously. Then the doors opened. The chief surgeon stepped out. The bullet missed his heart. Relief swept through the hallway. But he needs time. He may never fully recover. The following morning, against every doctor's advice, Lorenzo requested a meeting of the entire De Luca organization. The grand hall filled once more. This time, the atmosphere was heavy with uncertainty. Lorenzo slowly rose from his chair, his shoulder heavily bandaged, his voice weaker, but still commanding. For years, I believed leadership belonged to blood. He looked toward Marco. You've served this family faithfully. Marco lowered his head respectfully. Then Lorenzo turned toward Isabella. But leadership is measured by who stands firm when everything is falling apart. He extended his hand. Isabella. She hesitated, then stepped forward. Lorenzo removed the historic De Luca signet ring, the ring every Don had worn for nearly a century. The room watched in complete silence as he gently placed it into Isabella's hand. From this day forward, you will prepare to lead the De Luca Empire. Across the room, Marco forced a smile. Everyone applauded. No one noticed his hand slowly closing around his phone beneath the table. A single encrypted message had already been typed. It contained only 6 words. The crown belongs to the orphan. He pressed send. And somewhere, far beyond Sicily, someone smiled. Act 5. The daughter who earned the crown. 3 days after Lorenzo named Isabella his successor, the attacks began. A De Luca warehouse in Catania burned overnight. 2 shipping routes were hijacked. Several trusted captains disappeared without a trace. Someone wasn't merely challenging the empire. They were trying to break it. From the inside. Inside the De Luca war room, maps covered the walls. Reports arrived every hour. Marco stood beside Isabella, helping coordinate responses. Calm, loyal, supportive, exactly as he had always been. Yet something felt wrong. Too many attacks. Too much precision. Too much information. Someone always seemed to know their next move. Isabella remembered what her mother once wrote. The people who smile beside you are not always the people standing with you. She never forgot those words. Late that night, unable to sleep, Isabella reviewed security footage from the meeting where Lorenzo had named her successor. She wasn't searching for anything specific, just following instinct. Then she saw it. Marco, his hand beneath the table, sending a message. Second before the applause began, her heart sank. No, it couldn't be. Could it? She traced a message through encrypted communications recovered after the warehouse attacks. 1 recipient, 1 secure server, 1 connection. Everything led back to the same network funding the assassins. Marco. The next morning, Isabella requested a private meeting. Just the 2 of them. They met in the vineyard where they had played together as children. Marco arrived smiling. You wanted to see me? She held out the printed records. His smile disappeared instantly. Tell me I'm wrong. Silence. Please. Marco looked away, then laughed softly. Not with joy, with exhaustion. You know what hurts the most? He met her eyes. I actually loved you like family. Then why? His voice cracked. Because I spent 20 years believing I was enough. He pointed toward the estate. I gave everything to this family. I sacrificed everything. And in one moment, they chose you. Tears filled Isabella's eyes. I never asked for crown. Marco nodded. I know. That's what made it worse. He looked toward the horizon. The men behind the attacks promised me something. What? A future where I wouldn't always be second. And now... Marco smiled sadly. Now I know I was never their partner. I was just another pawn. Before Isabella could speak, gunfire erupted. Masked attackers emerged from the vineyards. The same organization, the same network, the same people Marco had trusted. Bullets tore through the rows of grapes. Marco pushed Isabella behind a stone wall. Stay down. The attackers advanced. One shouted, kill them both. Marco froze. Both? Realization struck instantly. They had never intended to honor their deal. They wanted every possible heir eliminated. Marco looked at Isabella. "I'm sorry." Then he stood and charged directly toward the attackers, giving Isabella time to escape. Gunfire echoed across the vineyard. When the shooting finally stopped, Marco lay among the vines. He had saved her life, just as Maria had once saved Lorenzo's. Several weeks later, the surviving members of the conspiracy were arrested or forced into hiding. Their financial networks collapsed. Their influence shattered. For the first time in years, peace returned to Sicily. Inside the De Luca estate, Lorenzo sat beside the fireplace. Older, weaker, but smiling. Isabella sat beside him, still wearing the signet ring. "You built this family," she said softly. Lorenzo shook his head. "No." He smiled warmly. "I protected it." He gently held her hand. "You built what it became." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm not ready." He squeezed her hand. "No leader ever is." He leaned back in his chair, looking toward the family portraits, toward his late wife, toward the life he thought he had lost, then toward the daughter he never expected to have. "Thank you." His voice was barely a whisper. "For giving me another chance to be a father." Moments later, Don Lorenzo De Luca closed his eyes for the last time, peacefully, with his daughter beside him. Months later, every major family in Sicily gathered at the De Luca estate. Some arrived out of respect, others out of curiosity. They expected a caretaker, a compromise, a symbolic leader. Instead, they found Isabella, confident, calm, wearing the De Luca signet ring. No fear, no hesitation, no need to prove herself, because she already had. She looked across the gathering and spoke clearly. "I was not born a De Luca." The room remained silent. "I inherited no throne." She paused. "But family is not defined by blood." Her eyes swept across the crowd. "Family is defined by the people who choose to stand beside you." And for the first time in the long history of the De Luca Empire, every captain bowed, not because they feared their new leader, but because they believed in her. The orphan had become the queen, not through blood, not through power, but because she earned the crown. The end